Hi, everybody. It's Celeste, and I will be covering Chapter 6, Teaching Devices for Increasing Student Learning from Lectures. So the introduction of this chapter starts out that it's not really recommended that lectures be the only teaching method that is relied upon. Good teachers do not solely lecture, but they utilize different teaching means. However, as the chapter points out, it does acknowledge that lectures are the most popular teaching style that is implemented throughout high school and also in college. So it's important that, if teachers are going to lecture, that they learn to do it well. And what does an effective lecturer look like? Well, teachers that are effective lecturers are often teachers that have clear learning objectives for their students. So that means that they're organized. They are also clear speakers. They don't tend to ramble or get distracted while they're lecturing. And they also employ a variety of lecturing styles and strategies depending on the context at hand. And some of those strategies we'll get into right now. So one of the main strategies that was introduced was slowing down. The chapter reveals, or this section of the chapter shows that the biggest complaint that college students had, especially college students with learning disabilities had, was that their professors were speaking way too fast for them to keep up. So in this section, we were introduced the concept of morphemes, and morphemes are just units of meaning. So the book gave a really good example of how the word president is just one morpheme because it's just one idea or one concept or one thing. But the word presidents, plural or with an S, is now worth two morphemes because now there's two ideas and two concepts and two meanings to keep track of. So teachers actually average about 10 morphemes per sentence, yet only 9 morphemes per statement is the maximum that people can understand without loss of meaning. And even then, some listeners can only process 5 morphemes per statement. And then slowing down becomes even more crucial if the speaker has a non-native accent, because it's another thing that students have to navigate on top of keeping up with what's said in the lecture. And not only do teachers have to slow down in, I guess, a physical sense when it comes to how they speak and present information, but also slow down with any new material that they decide to present as well. A lecture that has too many new ideas can often lead to a cognitive overload. So the chapter recommended that only 50% of the material, or ideally less, should only be new material. Another strategy that was given was to solicit students' examples. So to ask students to give examples based on their own lives and their own experiences that connect to the lecture material at hand. So the chapter gave example about students that were learning about cycles of change in their science class, and they were asked to come up with cycles that they can observe in their own lives. And they gave a bunch of different interesting examples, such as the cycle of being in break and going back to school and being in break and going back to school. That was one example. Another example that another student observed was the changing of seasons. So as you can see, through this strategy, students were able to connect the lecture material, with their own lives as well. And apart from that connection, students are also able to develop processing and critical thinking skills as they try to come up with their own examples. And they also deepen their own understanding of the subject as well when they start to hear their peers' examples as well. Another strategy that was talked about was the pause procedure. This is especially beneficial for students with ELN and attention deficit disorders. So how this strategy is implemented is that the teacher lectures for a bit, then pauses, and then they repeat as needed. And this allows students to keep up with their note-taking and also recall what they have learned. As during these pauses, activities that increase students' recollection and learning can be implemented. So as we can see in the image, we see that students are in a group activity or discussing as a group. This is one of the suggestions that was given in the chapter, that during these pauses, maybe the teacher can ask students to discuss what they just heard or listened to in the lecture as a group, and just maybe share out as a class what they remembered. Another example of an activity that can be done during one of these pauses is that the teacher can ask the students to write down a question that they have or write down one thing that they learn. And doing this really helps them recollect and just memorize and learn better as well. Another thing that students can do, teachers can do is to cue critical points. So this helps students distinguish between critical information, what's important, and non-essential information, what's not so important, by pointing out the main points through visual and verbal cues. And we can see that this strategy is very effective because a study that was ran with 80 Korean students who were ELL, some of these students did receive cues and some of them did not when listening to a lecture. And at the end, the cued group actually remembered significantly more information from the lecture than their non-cued peers. But for the strategy to work, teachers have to explicitly teach students these cues. And the chapter or this section of the chapter suggests that maybe teachers have like a bulletin board or a poster of, their phrases and cue words that they might use throughout the school year when they lecture. So as we can see here, we have an example. Maybe a teacher can signal to their students, write this down, or this will be on the test, and then some cue words might be in contrast, alternatively, on the other hand. This is one that I see pretty often now that I'm doing my observation. In an English class, as some of you may know, there's a lot of vocabulary and literary terms that students are expected to remember and memorize. So something that I see that my this teacher do is that she often says, "This is important," quite literally, right? Or she says, "This will be on your test," or "Write this down," and she lets students take a minute to write it down. So I find this to be really effective because it really makes students perk up or just be on the lookout for those keywords. So I really like this one personally. Another thing that teachers can do is to explicitly teach the big ideas. This is, again, especially beneficial to students with learning disabilities and that have ELN. Um, because oftentimes, and as the chapter mentions, especially in science classes, teaching isolated facts or just the small ideas can create students that don't have any of the core concepts down. And the chapter gives an example of that. Students who understand the life cycle of a butterfly, but they don't understand life cycles as a bigger idea or as a concept as a whole. So that was kind of one, I guess, pitfall, that happens when teachers don't teach the big ideas. And one way to teach the big ideas or to implement this strategy is think about the main concepts of the day and that relate to those big ideas of the course and focus on that. I personally use this because I mentioned to some of you before that I work at Chafee. This is the one that I like to use as well. And I like to do this at the beginning of the class where I talk about our learning objectives or our main ideas. And that really helps students kind of feel prepped going into lesson. So I really like this as well. And also it's really beneficial for teachers who tend to ramble because it keeps them on topic as well. Another thing or another strategy that was suggested is to provide an advanced organizer. And advanced organizers can consist of a list of important points that will be covered, a short discussion, a list of questions, a graphic organizer, or any other tool that will prepare the student for the lesson. And we can see that this strategy is pretty effective because a study by Lenz and Alley, and I think it was done in 1983, that was done with students with learning disabilities, found that students in the advanced organizer group significantly outperform their control group peers. And this also prevents any confusion as well, because with the graphic organizer or with advanced organizers in general, students know what is key information to look out for and what isn't. So again, like I said earlier, it helps distinguish critical information from non-essential information. And here are different examples of graphic organizers that maybe a teacher can supply to their students while they're lecturing. We have bubble maps. We have like I forget what they're called, but they break down like the big idea to smaller ideas. So again, different types of graphic organizers. This is one again that I see in my observation. Oftentimes, as they're reading as a class or when the teacher is lecturing, she'll often provide a graphic organizer or a little chart or an activity for students to fill out while they're listening to the lecture. And I find that to be, again, really effective based on my own experience seeing students, because again, if they have something that they know that's going to be turned in to the teacher at the end of the day, and also something to fill out and do, chances are they're just going to pay attention more. And that is it for chapter 6. So I hope that this summary was helpful. And yeah, I was able to learn a lot from this chapter, and I found it to be really interesting. So thank you so much for listening, you guys, and have a good one.